Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Procurement and Sustainability, Why Tech is the Smartest Bet. My name is Eva Fernandez-Ortiz, and I'm Digital Marketing Manager here at WBR Insights. First of all, I'd like to quickly welcome our speakers for today's session. Nick Hain, Head of Sustainability and Compliance at Integrity Next, Christina Whitman, Supplier Management and Sustainable Sourcing at Ostram, and Patricia Quinn, Sourcing Manager Band Risk at Swiss Re. Before we start, however, I'd like to quickly draw your attention to a few housekeeping items about today's console. The windows you see on the screen are completely customizable, meaning you can minimize, maximize, or move them around as you see fit. If you accidentally minimize the window, don't worry. Just click on the toolbar you can see at the bottom of your screen to bring it back up. You can also see a window featuring free resources linked to today's session. Feel free to have a look and engage with any files you might find relevant. Likewise, there is also a Q&A window on the screen. So please, feel free to submit any questions you have for our speakers today as we go along with the presentation. And remember, there will be time to answer them live during the last 15 minutes. Finally, our colleagues are on hand if you have any technical difficulties during today's webinar. Just send your message via the same Q&A window and we will address them for you. And now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Nick to kick off today's webinar. Nick, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Eva, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar today. My name is Nick Heine, and I'm the co-founder of the Supplier Sustainability Platform Integrity Next. And today's webinar will focus on how technology can help procurement and supply chain departments to meet their sustainability goals. And in order to answer these questions, I'm delighted to have two wonderful ladies here today and purchasing experts. So hi, Christina, great to have you here today. And I really look forward to your presentation, how Ostram handles supplier sustainability and how you utilize technology for that purpose. And also a big thanks to you, Pat, great to have you here. Sustainability seems to be an integral part of supplier management and risk management, which is your role at Swiss Re. So happy to hear more about your journey and your experience later in this webinar. So let's have a look at what we want to cover today. I will give a short introduction and then we will have a live survey. So be prepared. You can vote here directly on the screen and you only have 1 minute, so really be prepared and we will publish the results directly afterwards. So then I will hand it over to you, Christina, and we will hear about Ostram's sustainability agenda and how technology helps Ostram to achieve the goals. And directly after that, I hand it over to Pat. And following with her insights. And then after Pat's presentation, we have time for your questions. So as Eva already mentioned, if you have any questions to Pat, Christina, or me, then type it into this little box called Q&A, and we will pick up the questions afterwards and try and answer as many of them as possible. All right. So let me start with this one question. Why corporate sustainability and why now? McKinsey analyzed back in 2014 that the value at stake through sustainability issues can be as high as 70% of the earnings. So that's quite a bit. And why is it so? For instance, because consumers stop buying products when there are environmental concerns, right? So this really has a direct effect on the earnings and how on their buying behavior. So, and then on the other hand, we of course also have major investors like BlackRock CEO Larry Fink. He just beginning of the year announced that corporate sustainability will be a major selection criteria for their investment strategy. So yeah, and he really means it. So this is actually not a joke for companies. That means that indexes, funds, investment portfolios are continuously restructured. And that means that your company may fail out of such an index or a portfolio due to a lack of focus on sustainability. And on the other hand, it also means that you have the chance to get into such an index or investment portfolio by focusing on sustainability. So you see, it's really important. It became a really important topic from these two aspects. And there are also, in addition to the consumers and the investors, there are two other groups that need to be considered when it comes to sustainability and your sustainability goals for your corporation. On the one hand, there are the business clients, your business clients. So if you work for a B2B company, the consumer behavior still may affect you indirectly because your client pass the sustainability requirements onto you one by one. And then on the other hand, we see an immense and increasing amount of sustainability laws in the recent years. So just to name a few, there is the French Duty of Vigilance Act, there is the UK Modern Slavery Act, there is the US Dodd-Frank Act regarding conflict minerals, we have the US CSR reporting directive, and we have all these national action plans going on in many EU countries currently. And we will see some new laws upcoming in the next few months. So in Germany, for example, there is the Lieferkettengesetz under discussion. When we look at Switzerland, we have something called Konzernverantwortungsinitiative. We have the EU Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation coming up in March next year. And beginning of 2021, the EU Conflict Minerals Directive will also become effective. So quite a few laws already in place or coming up. So regulatory is really also a big part. So you see legislators have now raised that purchasing and supply chain play a considerable role when it comes to sustainability. If we look at, for example, if we look at emissions balance sheets, so greenhouse gas emissions, the amount which comes from the supply chain, it's called Scope 3 emissions, often cover over 90% of the emissions. So I think this shows the crucial role of supply chain and purchasing. And this is also probably why you are here in this webinar, talking and hearing about sustainability in procurement and in the supply chain. But there's also a challenge. So when you want to monitor the sustainability of your suppliers and your supply chain, that's actually a real challenge given the huge number of suppliers. Because typically companies have a couple thousand suppliers, sometimes over a couple tens of thousands of suppliers. So that's quite a challenge to get their arms around that and monitor all this huge amount of suppliers. So companies usually concentrate on only the top spend suppliers, the strategically important suppliers, and very often just on direct material. So if you make the difference between direct and indirect. So not seldom, this accounts just 5% of the suppliers, but even the suppliers with a lot less spend can expose you to the same risk as the top spend suppliers. So actually you should monitor them all accordingly and then decide who needs your attention. And this is actually where technology comes into place, because every time you have these tasks to gather data about thousands and tens of thousands of participants, here their suppliers, and you have millions of data sources in background that you need to consider, then technology can really help you. And of course, I founded Integrity Next together with my two co-founders, and we focused on especially this issue. So just to give you one example, the Integrity Next platform covers all the relevant ESG and CSR topics, and it is capable to monitor all your suppliers for malpractice instantly, automatically, 24/7. And it automatically assesses your suppliers and gathers certificates. Or it even shares the profiles of the suppliers which already are on the platform, which is a good thing because when you're on a platform, suppliers only have to answer their self-assessment once, and then they can share it with all their clients on the platform. And of course, the results will be provided in a sustainability report. We actually provide a sustainability report on the GRI standards base, and it is certified by GRI. And of course, it really makes sense to integrate such a platform, such an initiative into your IT landscape. So for example, it must be possible to trigger assessments and monitoring from your ERP system, and also feed back the results about your supply base back to your ERP system and make sourcing decisions on that, or feed it to other procurement systems or business intelligence. I think that is very important. So how does that work? I will show a short video. Simply add your suppliers to the platform, and the platform will automatically obtain the self-disclosures and certificates from the suppliers, and then show you which suppliers are green, which ones are red, and which ones need your attention. And at the same time, Integrity Next continuously scan all the new websites and databases on the internet and also social media messages to identify those suppliers with critical information. If there are any issues with self-disclosures or negative messages, if they arise, the platform will then create an alert and inform you via email. So this is how we do that. And it's one example of how technology can help companies with their sustainability in the supply chain. And now is the question, what about you? So as mentioned earlier, we want to do a little survey. So you should be able to see this question on your screen now and vote on the question. So what we would like to know is, do you have technology in place to support your sustainability goals, your efforts? And can be no. Maybe you're planning to do so, or you even have technology. And I will give you 1 minute to answer the question, and then we will see your answers immediately afterwards. All right, so for those who came in later, we are currently doing a survey. You can let us know if you in your company already utilize technology to support your sustainability goals and drive sustainability in procurement. Please just click on one of the answers. All right, I will give you 10 more seconds. Once you have entered your answer, please click on the submit button. All right. Let's see what you have answered. Oh, okay, that's pretty equivalent. So 1/3 says, no, we don't have technology in place currently. 1/3, a little bit more than 1/3 is actually planning to do so. And this is probably the reason why you're here, to better understand how other companies like Ostram and Swiss Re utilize technology to get their arms around the sustainability aspects in procurement and supply chain. And already 1/3, yay, that's very good. Already 1/3 is utilizing technology for that. So thank you for your feedback. And now we want to see the examples and hear more about how Ostram is actually doing this and utilizing technology, and what's their their agenda, how to foster sustainability. So Christina, Ostram is a high-tech company in photonic. That's, wow, what does it mean? You will probably explain what photonic means. So I'm very curious.
We put a bit flesh to this. Okay, perfect.
But it's needless to say that Ostram utilizes technology, because you're a technology, a high-tech company, definitely, and you foster your sustainability. So please, over to you, and let us know how you do that.
Perfect. So first of all, welcome also from my side, and thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to share some of the insights on our journey towards sustainable sourcing at Ostram. And despite that you might hear about Ostram these days in daily news, next time maybe you have in mind that Ostram currently is a group of more than 23,000 employees working in 120 countries globally. And in 3 divisions, we try, as Nick just mentioned, really to use the full potential of light, ranging from ultraviolet to infrared. So not only the visible light, this is what we refer to as a photonic player, not only the visible light, but really the full range. And within our division Opto Semiconductor, we concentrate on developing and producing LEDs, providing exactly this full range of light, which is then also used more and more in our automotive business unit, be it interior lighting or external lighting in the headlights or rear lights of the car. But more and more, talking about autonomous driving, light, especially infrared, plays an important role also as an enabler for future more and more autonomous driving. In our third division, we have the digital technologies bundled, meaning light management system, city beautification, especially if we go to Asia, but also very important horticulture, so indoor farming on big scale. And in these 3 divisions, we aim really to improve people's life now and in future. And with such a rather big mission, for sure, we also need to make sure that on the way to produce those products, no one gets harmed. So together with the mission and in our 4 core area fields or fields of competence, we see that our mission actually fits perfectly also to support the UN Sustainability Goals, the SDGs. And just to highlight some aspects here to make it a bit more bring a bit more flesh to the bones. If we check for the goal 3, good health and well-being, our technology supports wearables in order to really provide basic medical health checks, be it like blood pressure, just via your wearable, which you have with you at any time. Now, in these days of the pandemic, also ultraviolet LED support us not only in producing clean water or ensuring clean water, but also can be used without any further chemicals on surfaces and in the air. Talking about connectivity and mobility, for sure also Goal 11 for sustainable cities and communities, we can support quite heavily, be it in the horticulture, to provide mega cities with good quality food, but also connecting cities, infrastructures, and supporting autonomous driving in the cities. Our big transition from traditional lighting to LEDs for sure was driven by energy efficiency. So climate action is one of the goals where we have quite a long tradition in supporting and also feel very linked to this one. And last not least, being present in 120 countries, we also see the responsibility that comes with this global footprint in order to support responsible production. And goal number 12 actually is then also the perfect link why we see that procurement really has an important role to play. And Nick, you mentioned it earlier in your topics already. So we see really that by moving from rather linear supply chains into this now global ecosystems with a lot of partners, contract manufacturing around the world, we see that the CR, so corporate responsibilities, also enhance in the scope. So we really saw the need that our external impact needs to be considered, and we needed to increase transparency here. We see in a minute how we used tools in order to reach this better monitoring of the whole supply chain, not only on the strategically relevant ones. And with this, we see that actually procurement early involvement gets a complete new spin, not only focusing on the savings and commercial aspects, but also being in the right position to really provide the future or to be the safeguard of an integral network in order to minimize CR risks. This new scope of offering really to provide the full transparency of the of the supply chain and to have a clear CR management in place also allows us to gain more growth opportunities, be it in sustainable finance with good interest rates, be it attract the right customers, and Nick, you mentioned it, also on investor side, it is really becoming more and more crucial to perform here on a very high level, provided with a clear policy framework. How do we do it now as the stage is set? To give you a bit more concrete examples, what we do with our supply base. So first, we really cluster our suppliers based on what we buy from which country, which PBO, and which category is involved. Here we use the Responsible Business Alliance risk tool just to have a good overview, a lot of available KPIs here. We then take all this information, all the risk assumptions into our internal procurement system called PUMAS, and hard code based on the risk evaluations, what action do we need to take, what requirement is there behind each supplier. This can range from a corporate responsibility self-assessment, where we use Integrity Next, full-blown CR audits based on the risk assumption, or, as we all know, standard certificates, be it the 14,000 or the former OSHA's 18,000, now the ISO 45,000. So we have a full range depending on the risk assumptions. And just to give you an insight, what it looks for a buyer of a quality colleague in Ostram. What you see here is our supplier dashboard, what we have for each of our suppliers in the complete network globally. It brings together all the information we have from all the different stakeholders within Ostram on suppliers. You see the classical risk KPIs, material risk, and also the corporate responsibility directly embedded here in this dashboard to have the right awareness, and seamlessly, without entering any separate tool, buyers can click on the link to Integrity Next and have access to all the answers from their suppliers. And by clicking on the different icons per questionnaire, they even can drill down into the menu, what you also saw in the video. Quite handy for us as well. all these is built up responsive so that we can take it on our smartphones to the next on-site visit to the supplier and directly verify, also cross-check some of the answers to make this self-assessment also really our working or base with the supplier in order to improve the situation. And this is the essence, actually, of this transparency, that we can develop towards more sustainable suppliers, can support them, and also all our internal stakeholders have clear and fast access to the system by the API to Integrity Next. Besides this detailed monitoring, where we currently have around about 800 suppliers onboarded, we also use the, I think you saw it in the video, the tracking of the social media voice for some thousand suppliers that have actually a low risk after our risk assumption, but still we want to use this alert functionality. So just in case something pops up in the World Wide Web, we would be informed via a short alert and still can then react and, for example, go for a full-blown monitoring and invite them to provide the full questionnaire. So to sum it up, actually, we at Ostram see that since few years, we are facing the next logical evolution of global supply chains. So after in the 90s, we had the quality focus. Now we see that sustainability and ensuring CR is kept throughout the complete upstream supply chain is perfectly also fitting towards the new Ostram, because we also want to contribute to a sustainable future. We see that in the setup of reaching out to more and more external partners, also our responsibility reaches far beyond our location fences. So we need to make sure that along the complete chain, we can be sure no one, neither the environment, is harmed. And we see really that the procurement organization is in the right position to support the company here with a real new value proposition for the company. And as capacities are limited, we need to invite the right niche products to support us exactly in embedding sustainability in procurement in a more or less seamless way. And with this, for the time being, Nick, back to you. And I think we will have the Q&A afterwards. Looking forward to this.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Christina, for that. It was great insights. And yes, there are some questions already in the Q&A section. So, but please continue to place your questions there, and we will pick them up after the next part. So going from high-tech company to financial services, Pat, what does your sustainability journey at Swiss Re look like, and what is your experience or the experience you made utilizing technology? Pat, over to you.
All right, thank you, Nick, and thank you to the Integrity Next team for the invitation to participate in today's webinar. For those of you unfamiliar with Swiss Re, we are one of the world's leading reinsurers. We are spread across 80 different offices, about 14,000 employees, and we are headquartered in Zurich, Switzerland. At the highest level of our company, we do have a group sustainability strategy that's very much focused on the next benchmark year of 2030. And with that, we have 3 different components that we're looking at. On the environmental side, Swiss Re is very engaged with climate risk mitigation and also with energy transition. The middle area of building societal resilience is also extremely important to Swiss Re, and this is the area where we can have a direct input into the procurement side of things, helping vendors on their sustainable development. And then the last thing that we are looking forward to doing is really pushing forward our digital solutions to offer more affordable insurance offerings. How do we get there? We have 3 high-level principles that we believe in. The first one is to really embed sustainability in our organization. That's making sure that we have DNA throughout. When it comes to leadership, Swiss Re gets very excited about participating in sustainable measures. And we're not afraid to put our toe in the water, so to speak, and look at new opportunities as that is something to be engaged in. And then, of course, to quantify. Anything we do on the sustainable front, we always want to be able to measure. And this is where Integrity Next helps us out. From a global sourcing perspective, we do have global reach. Right now, most of our vendors are concentrated in Europe and the Americas, Asia, and some in Australia. We have approximately 250 Tier 1 and Tier 2 vendors, over 8,000 Tier 3 vendors. Our annual spend is greater than $1 billion a year, focused across various categories that can be structured in the service areas of IT and data, professional and HR, and the property and business services. So what does the journey look like for Swiss Re? Going back in the timeline, we can trace it back to probably a little bit earlier than 1979, but in that particular year, Swiss Re put forward their first sustainability-related publication. Thereafter, there was a big push to get involved with greenhouse gas emission work and reducing that. Also different initiatives across the globe, whether it was UN-based or the Paris Accord. Also getting involved with writing more internal and external communications so that people could really understand where Swiss Re was taking major steps in their sustainable development. And what's interesting is if you look from 1979 to about mid this decade, that's about 35 years. So that's a long time to get where we are today. And now things seem to be accelerating, which I think is a very good thing. But if you look at that front end, most of this work we could classically call CSR, the corporate social responsibility end of it. But in 2016 and in 2017, the company looked at not only what we were doing within our own footprint, but where could we find those areas of influence that we could help in the sustainability area. 2 of those areas have been in the procurement side and then also on the asset management side. On the procurement side, who are the vendors that we're working with? How much are they engaged in sustainable development? Same thing for asset management. Where are we making our investments? Where are we putting our money? What companies deserve to have the focus and the energy that Swiss Re wants to do and to partner with? So back in 2015, 2016, our company first started out with EcoVadis as a company to do the ESG assessments. With those 350 Tier 1, Tier 2 vendors, we got about a third of them between 2016 to where we are today. A third of them reside still with EcoVadis, and we still engage with EcoVadis. Some of the pushback that we had received from not getting the other 2/3 onboarded has been that the cost of joining EcoVadis was a bit difficult. So as we looked for an alternative, it was very easy to partner with Integrity Next, who offer a cost-free cloud-based platform that addresses all of the key components to ESG. So we began the relationship in 2018. I was hired in January of this year in 2020. I've been working with Jenny at Integrity Next. We have run tactically, I think, 3-4 different campaigns throughout late spring and all during summer to make sure we land the plane. We are going to bring all of our Tier 1, Tier 2 vendors on board with ESG assessments by the end of the year. And that will allow us to be in a good position to start in 2021 with what we call our vendor development program. That'll be on the following slide. 2025 and moving toward that 2030 benchmark year, this is where we start to really work with the idea of scorecarding and internally different themes that we have with Swiss Re, and really partnering with our vendors to say, we want your participation, and if not, then we will exit. working with particular vendors at that time. So again, in summary, as an analogy, this year is all about finally getting everybody onto the dance floor. Next year is starting to teach everybody how to dance, and eventually we all want to be doing the tango. And this is going to take a little bit of time. So when we look to doing this vendor development program, right now we're structuring it and putting it together, but we see 3 cornerstones that we could look at. One, the first one being on the enhancement side, is really developing the benchmarks, looking at a specific criterion that we might want to highlight, pushing that forward, and then including that on the theme for purchasing. How are we using our money to do procurement, and making sure we're working with those vendors that support that vision. And then on the opposite side would be exclusion. For those vendors that are not following and supporting a vision of sustainable development, then we would avoid that and treat it as a risk and step away from it. So again, we would do all this by having a mandate, using smart benchmarking, working with Integrity Next on that important middle one, which is monitoring and reporting. That will allow us to do better vendor selection with the ultimate goal of having stewardship across the supply chain. So working with Integrity Next, for me, it's been absolutely a terrific experience. What do we get from them on the Swiss Re side? We get this automated ESG solution. We are able to smoothly get to an onboarding rate that has really been successful. And as Christina had mentioned, for Ostram, this is the starting point to allow us to have transparency, finally, into ESG assessments for our vendors. We use a 5+1 approach with Integrity Next. They have many components that you can choose from, which is nice. They offer that flexible framework. So we have the standard 5 that you can see there, from anti-bribery, human rights, down to supply chain, et cetera. But we add on diversity, because inclusion and diversity has always been important for Swiss Re. And now, and more importantly, this year especially, it really has come to the forefront. Moving forward, we very much appreciate working with Integrity Next as they are developing solutions that allow us to do future automation of integration between our systems and theirs. So having that seamlessness of data transfer and getting to available information more quickly, and this is where the tech solution comes in, that's I think is really exciting, because I think that there's opportunity to do a lot more on that front. And then on the right-hand side, you're seeing a copy or a view of what we deemed a very successful approach for our different campaigns this year. So if you're starting out, having a communique that you can invite and push out to your vendor base and say, here's some basic information, here's our CSR report, so you know where we're coming from. But more importantly, it transitions into the Integrity Next space. How do you participate? How do you go about an ESG assessment? And here are some available webinar training dates for them to participate within. So that's just a very brief view of our journey. Nick, I will stop here and turn it back to you.
Thank you, Pat, for the insights. That were very good to see. And we have quite some questions in the pipeline. So let me pick those. There are quite a few questions around the KPIs and standards. So it's which are the KPIs to orientate on with the sustainability program and efforts? I think this could be a question for both of you. So Christina, what was the set of KPIs or the standard you focus on at Ostram?
So I guess we have rather classical KPIs when it comes to the sustainability. So either we have the ready for business requirements embedded, like do we have the self-assessment in place? Only then your KPI will come up as you have the ready for business status. Then we have the conflict mineral, which is quite an important topic for us, where we always track, do we have the 100% coverage? And what we are actually currently aiming for is embedding this information also in the ETCO, so in our electronic total cost of ownership, to transfer the information then directly to the sourcing decision, which would even allow us for a better KPI monitoring.
Okay. Pat, how is this at your end in financial services? Probably a little bit different. Which are KPIs you're orientating on when you started with the sustainability program?
Well, yes, we do at Swiss Re. We focus across our organization. So within it, we have different groups that take a look at a different slice. So we have people that are focused on what it means to increase our share of sustainable business, focused on the product. What does the product look like? How are we marketing it? Who are we working with? We're going to underwrite somebody. Perhaps we give a discount if they have excellent ESG scores. That kind of thought process on that. The other one would be looking at from a CFO again. What is your data footprint out in the world? From our side, again, I kind of indicated that we have this tier 1 and tier 2 approach from a sourcing side. So those are very clear. There are clear percentages that are wrapped around what we have to do this year and next year. And then, of course, we've spoken a little bit about the greenhouse gas, the net zero emissions by 2050 and all that. So we have all of these elements are combined together throughout our organization. But that's Swiss Re. I think one of the questions too was, well, how do you start? How do you get to KPIs that make sense? What I would suggest people starting out or people that were on the younger side of the sustainability maturity model is look to your ESG firm, in this case, Integrity Next. Look at the methodology that underlies the questions that are asked in the survey. Work with the company to get a really good understanding of that, because what underlies those questions, those are your KPIs. Those are things that can be directly measured because Integrity Next is gathering that information for you. So not only would you have transparency into it, but you'd have a mechanism to automatically report on it. So again, there's a lot of flexibility in what Integrity Next is offering. Look through all of the different options. Again, we used a 5+1. But there are many more you could pick, and then look underneath at the questions and align your strategy around that. I think they're very accommodating to do that. Anyway, that's a recommendation on my part, because Swiss Re, we already started down a road. We already had our KPIs in place, and sometimes we find ourselves in a retrofit. Here's something we're interested in. Can we measure it? And the answer sometimes is yes, and sometimes no.
Okay, thank you. And when you say you look at the assessments that we have on the Integrity Next platform, to clarify this also, at Integrity, we don't have our own standards, right? We don't believe in building our own set of KPIs and standards, because there are so many and very brilliant established standards out there. So when it comes to sustainability reporting, for example, there are frameworks, and we look at our customer base. Actually, around 80% of the companies that report and use a reporting framework, they use the Global Reporting Initiative, so the GRI standards. And so that's what we do. We see that there are KPIs you can report on and which are established. So if we look at all the sustainability reports, the non-financial disclosures of companies, many of them use these standards. And I think this will help, because if stakeholders look at your company and they find the same KPIs, like they are used to see these KPIs when they look at other companies, they really are able to compare and understand what you do, right? And if you use your own way, your own standards, then you have the risk that this is not really understood. Or I mentioned it earlier when we talked about regulators, when we talked about finance, so equity. then these people really use the measurement of these standards to evaluate your company. And the closer you are to their KPIs, the KPIs they're using, the better it probably is, because they can really evaluate you in a good way. And so this is what I always recommend. Don't try to invent the wheel for you. There are established standards out there, and take those. And you probably need to focus a little bit, because these standards are quite huge. They cover quite some topics, but depending on in which industry you are, some things matter more than others, and you have a better impact when you focus on some aspects than you focus on others. So to give you an example, and we heard that from you, Christina, one of your major topics is conflict minerals, right? So you can't go without conflict minerals. So you need to pick a standard. And there is, for example, the Responsible Minerals Initiative, which has established a process and a template to report on conflict minerals. And it really helps that everybody's using this template, because it can easily aggregate the information and hand it over from one point in the supply chain to the next dot in the supply chain. So this is one example, right? All right.
And I think this is really also something.
Yes, please.
What we really like about Integrity Next, that it does not implement a new individual standard, but we can connect it with all the already in existing standards. And I think this is also one key success factor, that our suppliers accept the tool that easily, because whenever they have a clear certificate covering this questionnaire, it is very smooth for them to answer. No long, multiple pages questionnaires, but really down to the point. So I think this is also good for the supplier feedback when you want them to join the system.
That's good to know. Thank you. Another topic, and a couple of questions refer to greenhouse gas emissions, carbon footprint. So what role does it play in your organization and when you in your sustainability program? I think that's a really interesting question, probably for both of you. And we also see this topic coming up more and more, especially when it comes to supply chain. So companies have started reporting on their own carbon footprint. Many really report on that and have their emission statement ready. But as I mentioned earlier, in many companies, even over 90% of the greenhouse gases come from the other players in inbound supply chain. So this is what the Greenhouse Gas Protocol calls the Scope 3. And this is why now this really hits procurement and supply chain. How's this at Ostram, Christina? Is this a huge topic for you guys?
Yes. So although downstream, as our products for sure they consume and they consume for a long period of time, though the individual consumption is low, although the downstream is the bigger part, for sure we can only really change and have an impact on the upstream supply chain. So since now it's now the third year for us that we report also our Scope 3 emissions in the CDP. So we joined the carbon disclosure program here to also have a clear setup in order to internally get a grip on the Scope 3 emissions. And I mentioned that we really cluster our complete spend based on from which country do we buy, which items, which category, so that we also, based on this, could start the first check, okay, what are our main CO greenhouse gas emission categories? And now we are tailoring it down and really contacting the right suppliers where we see the best lever also to optimize and improve the greenhouse emissions. So it all comes back to first have the right transparency on what you are actually buying from which country in order to tackle the right category.
Interesting, yes. And again, you mentioned two things. You mentioned the CDP and you mentioned greenhouse gas protocol. So back to the first question, these are two standards which you can consider when it comes to greenhouse gas or carbon aspects, right? Pat, is carbon footprint an issue, a topic at a reinsurance company?
Absolutely. Again, we do it in two different ways. We use a net zero GHG emissions approach by 2015 on our asset and liability side. So here we're looking at promoting products and solutions that support a transition to low carbon economy. So even if we're not doing it directly, we're doing it indirectly. We're looking to, again, use ESG metrics to make sure that our Swiss Re book on assets and liabilities reflect those companies that have a sustainable development program. We also want a net zero portfolio alignment. We do the share of green, social, and sustainability bonds. So that's on the asset side again. On the other side, within operations, here we have a remaining footprint, and we're very committed to doing the carbon removal certificates. So we actively participate on that level. We also have internal employee programs that we support for COYU2, and this allows us individually as an employee of Swiss Re to get involved in purchasing smart energy substitutes. And yeah, that pretty much rounds it out. Those are the key points on it for us with a carbon footprint. And again, there is a big focus on the environment, and I always remind people that it's ESG, and the S and the G, the social and governance components. There's so much in there that this is, I think, there's starting to be a good shift in that direction, and I look forward to really working with our vendors and isolating and targeting specific themes and interests that'll help us move forward in a good way.
Thank you, Pat. I have another question for you, Christina. It's a little bit long. Let me push this to the slide area. So with thousands of specifications across multiple categories, how Ostram has built sustainability criteria across their specifications and supply chain. So what are the technology solutions that enable them to achieve it?
Yeah, I think partly I hope I already answered it. The core is really our huge database that we really were able since now more than 15 years to build on this, to cluster it, to make it more specific. And if I know which portion of my spend and therefore which suppliers in this bucket, for example, could potentially have the 3TGs or could contain some conflict minerals, then it's also then quite easy to embed, to code in a specific rule that the requirement in order to do business with this specific supplier, you need to hand in the CMRT on the right level. So that the starting point was always we needed the transparency, what we are actually buying. And afterwards, we also for sure gathered the feedback from our cross functions. So EHS, very important, sustainability department, compliance teams. And together with them, we checked, okay, for this category, what would you see as a requirement? All this catalog in the end was hard coded in our system. And then each supplier gets red flags, like we know it maybe from other systems as well, a red light in case something's missing, so that we have the alert and directly can go for it. Hope this answers a bit the approach we took.
Thank you,
maybe
Christina.
I can also this integration, so the API for sure helped a lot. And in this case, if it's integrated in our system, makes it smoother. And I saw one question: how did we get the resource approval? As the process is so much more efficient, rather than checking CR aspects manually via a Word document, it was rather easy to convince the team to go for automation here.
Thank you. Good to know. I have another question. I will push it to the slides. I think it's a question for me. So, but it perfectly ties in what you just said, using APIs to integrate your solutions you use. So this question, someone's asking if Integrity Next is compatible, integratable with SAP. We have all our supplier data in SAP, and running it in more than one system is close to impossible. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think I have never had a customer in my entire 15, 16 years in procurement solutions before Integrity Next and now with Integrity Next who did not work with SAP. So this is very important. We know that Integrity Next is kind of a very focused product that focuses and specialized on sustainability in the supply chain. And this only makes sense if you're able to integrate with your entire procurement IT landscape and to make use of that data. And of course, one of the big players is SAP. We became an official SAP partner this year, and we already have, I think, 2 or 3 handful of customers which deeply integrate with Integrity Next. And there are various use cases. So one is to kind of automatically, with one click in your SAP materials management module, for example, you want to approve a new supplier and want to do the pre-qualification. Some customers, they just tick a box in their SAP module and hand over automatically the master data, the supplier master data set to Integrity Next, and then rerun the monitoring and the assessments and feed back the information into SAP MM so that the purchaser can make a decision on whether he can continue with that supplier, or there are a couple of questions that need to be clarified, or he can't open the supplier for a purchase order. So this is just one use case. There are many other use cases with supplier relationship or supplier lifecycle management systems like those from Ariba, Jega, or Coupa. So we're highly integratable with our APIs, and I think this is really necessary because we know we more or less just deliver sustainability data and some compliance data to enhance your supplier profiles and enable you to make better sourcing decisions and go towards a more sustainable future. Right. And we're almost on top of the hour. Maybe one more question. There are a few more questions about. There's an interesting one. CO2. Yeah, but there's an interesting. So I think this is for you, Christina. What is the usage contribution of classical on-site audits? So we're talking about technology today, helping you to get your arms around this huge portion of suppliers, but still audits is probably something that you still do, maybe a little difficult during the pandemic. How do you handle
that's
audits?
For sure. But we really hope to have a better start in fiscal year 21 now, and maybe we can add the technology aspect. We use technology in order really to derive with the right, or to come up with these with the right suppliers, we want to have audited in the full-blown version. But I think there is still a valid point to have auditors on site checking the payments, checking the hours our employee or the employees on our suppliers side have to perform. So it is still important to have this classical on-site perspective or views, but we use technology in order to really come up with the risky ones out of the thousands of suppliers in order to spend the capacity really on the best suppliers here. Hope this answers the question.
Yeah, I think there's a good. It really ties into doing both and making sense of the combination of both, right? So, right, we are already on the top of the hour. Thank you very much for joining and for all your interest and questions. I hope it was worth for you to invest this 1 hour. Thanks again, Pat. Thanks again, Christina, for the brilliant insights. We will provide you with the slides that we have shown today. So I will expect an email from me with the shown presentations later today. Right, so have a great rest of the day. Thank you for joining, and I hope talking to some of you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.